So hello and good evening and welcome to another production of Bringing Law to Life. My name is Vanette and I'm the head of Equality, Diversity, Inclusion and Accessibility in the Faculty of Business and Law. I'm also a Student Experience Manager and I'm also an Associate Lecturer here. Joining me this evening is my colleague, Bryony Gilbert, also a Student Experience Manager. Thank you everybody for attending. This is one event in a series of 14 conversations that are being hosted by the law school. You can sign up to the other events for more opportunities, or you can watch the recordings that are available on the law school's YouTube page. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our special guest, Frances Lyons, but first I just want to talk to you a little bit about equality, diversion, inclusion and accessibility in the law profession. The law profession as a whole has increasingly recognized the value of diversity and inclusion, but it has been slow to take steps to foster a more inclusive environment. Equality, diversity, and inclusion is one of the regulatory objectives that's recognized in the law. The law states it encourages a strong, independent, diverse, and effective legal profession. Thinking about some of the facts and figures, the Solicitor's Regulation Authority's latest report, based on a 2023 survey, does indicate that we have a slow but steady increase in diversity amongst our legal professionals. 53% are female lawyers, 19% are Black and minority ethnic lawyers, and we have 6% who are disabled lawyers. However, a significant seniority gap remains for women, and there is a significantly higher proportion of lawyers working in one-partner firms than any other firm size. There's other statistics relating to lesbian, gay, and bisexual lawyers who make up 4.4% of the profession, and lawyers from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, which the gap there has been reduced from 21% in 2015 to 18% in 2023. The Bar Council has also been keeping tabs on diversity in the barrister's profession. Their report in 2021 on race at the bar showed that barristers from ethnic minority backgrounds were facing systemic obstacles to building and progressing a career at the bar. And more recently, their report on diversity in 2024 showed that there are still significant disparities for underrepresented groups, like those that I've just discussed. So the aim of this series of talks is to increase awareness and understanding of not only the obstacles, but the opportunities and support available for our students from underrepresented groups entering the legal profession. So in a moment, I'm going to speak with Frances Lyons about her career journey and some of these things that we have raised. And afterwards, there will be an opportunity for you to feedback on how you have found these sessions. If you do have any questions, please use the question and answer box to post them. If we run out of time and we don't get to your question in this session, they will, of course, be answered on the forum in the Law Study Home. So without further ado, welcome to Frances Lyons. Frances is one of our tutors in the law school, and like many of our tutors in the law school, she has a day job where she is a solicitor. She's first started her law career in one of the Magic Circle firms. She's had some very interesting array of clients, which she's going to tell us about in a moment. And then she has moved into consultancy since then. So Frances, talk to us about your career journey.
Thank you very much, Renette. That was a lovely start to tonight. So I'm Frances and I teach on W112, W240 and also on public law. I started off working in London for a city law firm for about 7 years. And during that 7 years, I got to do some really interesting areas of law. I did construction, housing, public law, and kind of business contractual law, and I had a really wonderful time. I did that for 7 years, and in that 7 years I got to do a secondment to central government, to the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and that was working on big construction projects for the department, so big kind of waste treatment plants and things that councils were building, which was really interesting. And then I was telling Wynette about this a bit earlier this week. That was a wonderful life, and I worked very hard, and I got lots of great skills. And then I went from that into working in-house for a French, Belgian um, energy company, which was also wonderful. So I got to travel to Paris, I got to travel to Belgium. I had this wonderful, glamorous existence. And then the inevitable happened. I got married and I had children. And it not that many women do manage to cope with all of that, but for me, I felt it was time. I wanted to take a bit of a different turn when I had children. And so then I took a little bit of time out, and I started working with the Open University around the time my second child, my daughter, was born. And that I also had the opportunity to do some consultancy work in the infrastructure sector. So I still do that about a day or two a week. As well as teaching with the Open University. So I suspect I'm a good example of someone who's taken lots of different turns in her legal career and tried different things. And in many ways, I've been really lucky because that early experience that I got working for a city firm gave me lots of skills, lots of contacts. And when the time came for me to want to find flexible work, I managed to do that from previous jobs. So it shows that it was worthwhile getting stuck in and working really hard at the beginning of my legal career, because that opened up so many options. And now I'm getting to teach, which I love, as well as do the law, which I also love. So in many ways, different aspects of my personality and career have been able to be met by slightly different jobs.
That's fantastic. Thank you,
Mhm.
Frances. So you initially started really in firm contract law, explaining terms to your clients, drafting up terms, and now you've moved into a strategic legal role rather than directly advising.
That's it. So I don't tend to advise on the nitty-gritty of a contract anymore, but I'll be giving more like strategic advice to a client on how they should use their lawyers and what they need to get their lawyers to advise on, where they need legal advice because they might not always know, what's the cheapest, most cost-effective way of them getting legal advice, what are the big kind of commercial issues. So I'm more kind of upper level now, which is different, and that involves kind of I don't sit there with kind of Westlaw working out detailed legislative provisions anymore, but I more give them an overview on what they need help on, how to get it, and then I also look at the advice that comes in from lawyers. So I get to work with some really big law firms and kind of scrutinize what they do, which is quite funny because that used to be what I did. And yeah, you know, it's interesting to turn it on its head and try different things.
It's interesting to hear that there's such a wide scope to go from actually being, a solicitor who gives advice directly to clients to working at a more meta level.
Definitely. And there's so many different types of organisation out there. You know, I work for a smallish consultancy company and it's with some specialists who used to work in my field. But there's such an array of employers out there. And the important thing is just to get stuck in and get your skill set. And then that gives you lots of flexibility later on.
Do you have any advice for anybody wanting to gain some experience or make their applications?
Definitely. So I've got a good little anecdote here. So my very first job in the law was working in a post room. So I was a student and I was interested in going to get a training contract and working in the law. And I just applied to a small regional firm where I lived at the time, which was in Birkenhead, which is by Liverpool. And I got this fantastic job delivering the post to different departments in the law firm. And I got to know everyone. I got to know the senior partner. I got to know the head of employment, the head of pensions. I knew the secretaries. I knew the cleaning lady or man. I knew absolutely everything about how that law firm works. And that was my first kind of foot through the door, so to speak. And we only have 2 feet, I guess, but I got one foot through the door. And then the senior partner of the law firm gave me a recommendation to get a bit of work experience with a big commercial firm in Birmingham, which was called Rag and Co. I think it's been renamed or absorbed into another firm now. And so that first opportunity gave me the kind of contact and the recommendation to go and get something better on, well, not that my work experience wasn't good, but it gave me the chance to put some legal work experience on my CV with my next placement. So I just would honestly say grab any opportunity you can. And sometimes it's quite hard to get the formal vacation placements that some law firms offer, but there's loads of jobs and opportunities available in law firms. So I would suggest just taking anything you can to see how it works and if you like that environment.
From entry level to strategic consultant.
Exactly. And I've worked with so many people who've come in on relatively kind of well, not strictly legal roles. I've met many lawyers who come in through the Silex route, through kind of training on the job, from paralegals to, there are so many ways. And I would say once you're in there, and if you're good at your job, it doesn't matter how you came in. I've worked with a senior partner of a whole law firm who didn't get a very good law degree, but she was brilliant on the job and great with clients and really good at building a team of advisors and still good at the law, I think. And she ended up becoming head of this law firm. So, it's there's many different ways in and ways to succeed.
So there's been lots of different paths to the law amongst your colleagues and also yourself. How accessible and diverse would you say your particular legal profession has been?
Don't know. I probably, there was definitely some diversity when I was starting out, but I think it has just improved so much. And I think there's now a lot more flexibility in the law as to when and where you work. I think law firms have really taken on a lot of diversity initiatives to broaden the profession. I'd say it's definitely got a lot less stuffy than when I started out. I think it was very much a connections world and who knew who in those days. And I do think things are changing, and particularly with things like the apprentice way into law. I've seen quite good changes happening. I really do think the law is getting more diverse, and there are different routes into the profession more now. So I'm hopeful. I think it's becoming more accessible, when it.
That's really encouraging. Do you think that there are any specific considerations in relation to equality, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility?
For any considerations for law firms or for people applying, or
Well, both.
I don't know. I think if you're looking at your traditional law firm, I don't mean this in a bad way, but they tend to be governed by profits and whether you're going to be profitable. And I think law firms are actually quite open-minded as to what that's going to look like. So if you've had a previous career, that can actually be really useful because you might have really good contacts. So I used to work with someone who used to work in scientific research, and they'd gone into kind of patents and intellectual property, but they knew their industry back to front, and they had a lot of commercial nous, which is what law firms are looking for. So I did hear that law firms are willing to take older applicants on if they know that they're going to get a return on their profit, because obviously they spend a lot of money on training you. And I think when I qualified in 2005, I think it was estimated that law firms spent about 80,000 on training trainees up in terms of time spent on them, and contributions towards fees and things like that. And I think that's probably double now. And so I think law firms will look at it in quite a kind of pound sign way. And if they think they can make a commercial profit from you, it maybe doesn't matter if you're an older candidate. If you work flexibly but you still deliver, that will be fine. So we have to remember that law firms are quite commercial, kind of lean organizations, but there are opportunities where you can bring in new clients or you've got contacts.
Yeah, that's really important to remember the realism of that, definitely.
And I know someone who's got a training contract in their 60s, which was fantastic. But the law firm said, well, if we can get 5-10 years, then we've made our profits back. So it's all totally possible.
Would you have any advice then for anybody overcoming a hurdle of accessibility?
I would just say there's some really good kind of diversity networks out there, which it's possibly worth contacting. The Law Society, I think, has got a list of them. And I think maybe just talk to people and find out if, for example, if you've got someone who works for a big company or a law firm, maybe ask them, like, are there any people like me in the organisation? Does it support people from diverse backgrounds and that kind of thing, and just ask lots of open questions. But I would say be really suspicious of kind of organisations that talk the talk but don't deliver on the ground. That's really important, because when we get offered jobs, people often offer huge things to get people into the role, but it's always digging below the surface and finding out what the culture's like and if it's actually supportive. But I should imagine most organisations now also publish the kind of composition of their workforce, and all of that information is much more available now. So do your due diligence and find somewhere where you're going to thrive and be comfortable. Definitely. I think that the government and councils are often quite good in terms of diversity, and they're willing to accept people who maybe can't do a traditional 9 to 5 5 days a week, but might need more flexibility, for example, if they're carers or if they've got a disability. So sometimes the public sector can be a bit easier to navigate if you have got specific requirements.
These are really invaluable
Yeah.
tips, and the importance of being your own lawyer to some extent and using those interviews as opportunities to interview the law firm as well and find out,
Exactly.
do you want
Yeah.
to work there?
It's got to be somewhere you're happy. I've seen so many lawyers get great jobs and crash out within 2 years because it wasn't right. So it's got to suit you and be what you need, because you're in there for a long time doing,
Yes, doing long hours
tricky
in
work.
some
Yeah, and
cases.
tricky work.
Yeah.
You got to trust the people you work with.
Well, who do you work with then, Frances? Who are some of the people and stakeholders that form your working life?
Well, I have a kind of strange array. So I work from home, so I do a lot of online meetings. I do 1 day a week in. So I've got my colleagues, and then I've got clients. And the stakeholders of those companies can be, and on those projects can be really diverse. So I'll often be dealing with government departments like the Treasury, DEFRA, organisations like that. We can be dealing with community groups. It can be, protest groups because someone doesn't like the infrastructure project. It could be people who are pro it because it's going to bring jobs to a local area. You've got political stakeholders, local officers for councils. You might have members. So I'm working on a big strategic infrastructure project at the moment, and we need close work with the councils on the ground. So it can be a mixture of high level government, local councils, interested residents, a huge amount of people really, which requires
Really,
all kinds of different skills basically.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
quite multidimensional, requires a lot of agility in your skill set as a legal professional.
Definitely. I mean, the thing is about the law is it's not always easy to understand. So you've got to be able to talk to people in a way where they understand what the issues are or what the impact is to them. Yep.
How would you like to tell us some more about the work-life balance in your profession then? Because you touched on that a little bit.
Yeah. I personally think work-life balance is always a challenge, and lawyers need to be really
Mm.
careful with things like burnout. Um, I I think probably my work-life balance wasn't very good when I was a young lawyer, being really candid. I think probably there was a slight element of kind of macho culture, work late, get your dinner in your law firm. There used to be a canteen down in the basement. The food was really nice. But it obviously wasn't very good being there at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And so I think I probably have had work-life balance a bit out of sync in those days. Although the kind of community amongst the lawyers was brilliant. I've still got some of my best friends from that time because we all work really hard together. But I think with time and maturity, I managed to reach a much better work-life balance, and I'm now managing to do 2 different jobs that I love. And
You are.
yeah, but I mean, also now I'm a mum, I kind of don't really have possibility of working crazy hours and things like that. I had to kind of rein in that side a little bit. But I think there's always creative ways which parents or carers or people who've got demands on their time can work, especially now. Sometimes I do log on a bit late at night, but I'm always very careful not to overdo it, and I'd never work really late into the morning now, because that affects your productivity. And it's all that things about looking after yourself, eating well, taking breaks, making sure you see your friends. All of that kind of stuff really helps. But I think a lot of that is tricky in the legal profession, and I think a lot of young lawyers probably struggle with that to start.
Yeah, it can take some time to find your own rhythm that works for you whilst meeting the targets.
Definitely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I wouldn't say it's a bad thing to kind of dive into that world, but then you have to work out whether it's for you. And if you want to be a partner in a law firm, then maybe that is right for you, and you're going to work really hard. Or maybe you just want to do something a bit different, like I've done, and taken a few different roads and had a diverse kind of interesting, I guess they call it a portfolio career, don't they, where you try different things. But I mean, that suits me a lot more, I think. I like a new challenge, and I don't particularly like things staying the same in a work kind of environment. So it's right for me the way it's worked out in the end.
Yes, and you're not the same person you were when you were a young graduate at all. So, and you gain skills and experience, and we also change as life goes on.
Definitely. And the great thing about the law is you can get those transferable skills.
Yes.
You can, and people will always respect you if you're a solicitor or you've worked in the law. If you've been a paralegal for a couple of years, people, that's something very distinct and concrete on your CV, and people always respect that kind of work, because it can be difficult, I guess.
Yeah, that's an important thing to note, that that's really your ticket and nobody can take it away from you really once you've
No,
got there. No, what you do with it, it opens lots of different doors depending on maybe what you want. Did you have any role models, Frances, in your career journey?
I did. I had a kind of informal role model. I had a good friend who I worked with at DEFRA, who was about 10 years older than me, and he'd worked for a what do they call it? The big four accountancy firms, and he'd kind of taken a slightly different route and was working for the government. But he was a really good kind of mentor to have, because he would um, kind of remind me to look out for myself, and not do long hours. And he would constantly say, there's lots of different things you can do. There is a different world out there once you've got these skills. And he would say, oh, I've seen this job here. You should apply for that. You should do that. So he was a kind of like a bit of a disruptor in a good way. It's like, if I hadn't have met him, I might have just tried to keep my nose down and kept on with my law firm. But he was like, no, there's so much other stuff that's really interesting out there. Why don't you give it a go? And it was through him that I applied for my post qualification job. So we're still in touch, and he's a great mentor. But I think the fact that he'd been through quite a corporate environment and working for one of the big accountancy firms, which is very similar to working for a big law firm, I think that was like really invaluable to find someone who'd done that but done something a bit different.
So he was both a mentor to you in terms of, the importance of your work-life balance and staying well, but at the same time, he was challenging you not to get too comfortable in your career, stretch yourself, grow.
Definitely. And he's actually gone on to be hugely successful, partly through following those principles. So yeah.
Good principles for all of us to take on
Exactly.
board.
And don't be scared. I know obviously we are subject to constraints, but sometimes it is worth taking a bit of a risk and trying something new.
Yeah. Thanks, Francis. And it sometimes will pay off in life as well. If you try very hard and, like I said, you make those connections and you apply yourself and you get your foot in the door.
Absolutely.
Francis, we have some questions from our audience. So the
Cool.
first one is, how easy is it to juggle a career in law and having a family?
Um,
You've covered this a little bit.
um, I think it really is going to depend. This is a bit of a politician's answer, but I think it is really going to depend on what kind of law you do and who you're working for, and then also how big your family is, what ages your children are, whether you've got things like family support. It's kind of like it's quite a holistic picture. Some areas of law when I worked for my law firm were considered a bit more family friendly. So for example, areas like I'm not trying to push you into an area of law you might not be interested in, but areas such as employment and pensions generally kept slightly easier hours than stuff like corporate law. So some areas of law will be slightly kinder on the hours, a bit more predictable. Even though you might still get the odd kind of big deal in those areas, it probably won't be continuous long hours. And then it depends on your employer. I probably wouldn't expect to go into like a bank and work as a solicitor and expect not to work long hours. Of course you probably are going to, but again, it's all about finding the right employer and the right role. It might be that you can do big hours as well if you've got lots of family support around, so it is definitely possible, but you just have to be aware of what's going to work best for you, if you've got caring responsibilities as well.
Yeah, so similarly on that, we have a question. Are firms sympathetic to things like flexible working or family-friendly policies?
I think they're so much better than they used to be. I think a lot of my friends do a mixture of in the office and home now. Probably if they're full time, it's probably 2 days in, 3 at home. So I think that's a lot more flexible. There's a lot more flexibility there. I'm seeing a lot more part time. Interestingly, I'm seeing a lot of male colleagues going for a 4-day week and getting it, both with clients that I work with and also amongst the men that I work with. I'm seeing actually it's quite common for the dads or the carers, or for whatever reason. It might just be you're a bit older in your career and you don't want to do 5 days and you want to go and write your best-selling novel and garden and things like that. But I'm seeing a lot more kind of 3-4 day week kind of working patterns. I think there's more acceptance of people working part-time as well. I think when I qualified, it was there, but I think in practice it wasn't well supported. And even if it was your day off, you'd still get a whole pile of emails sent your way. But I think, again, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think things have changed a lot in that regard.
The wider culture is changing and those patterns are definitely being disrupted. Well, hopefully that's answered that question. Are there any other questions that anybody would like to post in our question and answer section?
Nothing's too silly, or you can ask anything you want. You've got the
Thank
chance
you,
to ask.
Frances. Wait a minute to see if any other questions emerge. No further questions for Frances. If you do think of any other questions, you can, of course, post them on the forum and we will answer them later on the forum. But if there aren't any more questions, thank you, Frances, so much for letting us into your working life and into your career journey and giving us such valuable information and resources on how we can move forward in our career journeys. So before we close out, we have some slides on some further resources for our audience. And thank you to Frances and to our audience for your great questions. We have some slides on some career resources. Will we put those up, Bryony?
I'm so sorry, Wynette. I can't load them at the moment.
No.
I know.
That's okay.
I can share them with you. I can't get them onto my OneDrive is playing.
Oh dear. That's quite all right.
Games.
Will I load
I'm really
them up?
sorry. Yes, if you could. Same with the
let's see if I can get them up.
feedback sheet. Really sorry about that.
That's all right. Let's just bring those up. That's not the right slides either. Let's stop sharing that. And let's bring them up. There we go. So we have some further career resources from our Careers and Employability Service at the Open University. And some of these are quite specific to our law students, and you can see them on our Law Study Home website, information and advice directly related to your legal qualification and to further careers. more wider services, guides, online resources, tools, advice, but also some really important activities to start planning your career journey and meet your career needs can be found on the Help Centre from the Careers and Employability Services. Certainly want to highlight the Career Planning Guide to map your pathway to success. It's never too early to start planning what your next steps are. There's various opportunities and workshops available on Opportunity Hub. And there is CV 360 and Interview 360, which are AI tools to improve both your curriculum vitae, your CV, and also the opportunity to practice your interviewing skills. We also have a link there if you want to contact a careers consultant. So thank you again to Frances. Can we have a round of applause for Frances, please? So this has been
thank you very
wonderful.
much for joining.
Thank you, Frances, for joining us. And
thanks for the questions too. And thank you, Annette.
Got a lot of applause there and a lot of heart for what you brought to our Bringing Law to Life session, Frances. So before we go, there's some further resources on this slide, including Build Your Future with Career Confidence and Navigating Your Future Activity Pathway. And at any time during your studies and up to 3 years after, you can access our careers and employability services for tools, resources, attend events, and book consultations. Before we leave, can I ask you please to complete your feedback survey? The link is on this slide, and I'm now going to share the slide also in our Q&A section. So I'll stop sharing for a moment, and I will fetch the link for us now. So I've posted the link now in our Q&A session, so hopefully everybody will be able to see that. That's great. Well, that's all from us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, for your excellent questions, for Bryony, for your help in the background there. And we look forward to joining you at our next Bringing Law to Life session. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. Take care, everybody, and have a good evening.
Bye.